Call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse, Assembly Room, 500 4th Street, Wausau, at 7 p.m. on June 15th, 2023, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. I would like to request everyone silence their cell phones or put them on vibrate as to not be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your compliance. And we will move on to roll call and ask everyone to please sign in. Thank you. I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have this evening, including the viewing audience, and thank you for your interest in Marathon County government. And we'll move on to public comment, and we do have one individual who has signed up to speak, and that is Mr. Peter Weincheck. Peter, please. There you go.
Good evening. My name is Peter Weinshank. I live at 625 North 4th Avenue, Edgar. I am here to ask you, the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, to vote for a tax incremental finance task force. Marathon County TIF is an out-of-control monster. Back in 2000, Marathon County had $168 million worth of property in TIF. Now, as of 2022, $1.2 billion of Marathon County property is in TIF. TIF's percentage of the county's total tax base in those 2 decades has exactly tripled, increasing from 2.8% to 8.4%. Marathon County TIF is a stink pile. It offends conservatives, distorting the marketplace and giving a prince's scepter to municipal planners and consultants. It offends liberals, using the property taxes of average people to fund subsidies for the county's developers and business people. It offends good government moderates by depriving both the county and local governments of needed tax base to pay for basic services. A tax force is needed to document the impact, both good and bad, of TIF in Marathon County. TIF is a bigger deal than you might think. My best guess says that county taxpayers invest over $24 million annually in TIF. This is a government program bigger than your sheriff's department. It is bigger than the county's social services department. Now, does this investment pay off in promised dividends to local governments and taxpayers? That's an open question. We need to do the math. We need answers. Every year, this county board struggles with its budget. There's never enough tax revenue to pay for basic services. Perhaps TIF is at the bottom of that struggle. According to my calculations, the county could receive an additional $1,274,500 $577 in additional property taxes if this county's municipalities would, instead of having 15% of their tax base in TIF, would hold, instead of having 15% of their tax base in TIF, would hold to a 12% cap on TIF that is part of state law. Now, some might feel that a county standing committee could do the work of a TIF task force. I disagree. I was present when Supervisor Jim Rosenberg, chairman of what was then called the Education and Economic Development Committee, attempted to lead a robust TIF discussion at the committee level. It did not go well. And after a few meetings, the project was abandoned. A task force is the right venue for a study of Marathon County TIF. Municipal government and business can be granted a seat on the task force and voice their opinions. That can't happen with a standing committee. It is further argued that a task force has no power to change anything, and its work will be a waste of time. Again, I disagree. The task force will generate a report that will document the cost and benefit of TIF in Marathon County. The county will not keep this report to itself. It will share the TIF information with county schools, municipalities, and the North Central Technical College. I believe this information will cause these governments to see through the gauzy promises of TIF consultants and rethink TIF. I think the county, in taking a leadership role, can change the Joint Review Board votes in the future. I also believe that Marathon County TIF information can start a statewide conversation and possibly crack apart the bipartisan Madison Coalition in support of TIF. Now, you may ask why I think a TIF task force is so important. Well, I'll tell you. I used to be the chairman of a village planning commission. I voted for and helped create tax incremental districts. Over the years, I have changed my mind about TIF. I now see that it's a program that benefits government, but not taxpayers. I see that it's a program that helps some businesses, but at the expense of other businesses. I see that it's a program that supports development, but it also starves communities of the needed funds to maintain those developments over the decades. Every year, state government, inch by inch, liberalizes the Wisconsin TIF law. It has to. TIF is not sustainable. It is always hungry for more. And that concerns me. The path we are on will fully merge government and business. I don't want that. I like economic development the old-fashioned way. I hope you will agree that the time to look seriously into TIF is now. Please support the TIF task force. Thank you.
Thank you. And we didn't have any other individuals or persons sign up for public comment, so we will move on to the education presentation and reports. And we'll start off with item 8A, a special education committee relationship and board appointment process. And we have with us Kelly Capitz. Kelly, please.
Good evening. This is my first official presentation to this task force, so I'm really happy to be here. As Mr. Gibbs said, I'm Kelly Capitz. I am the director of Marathon County Special Education, and I'm really happy to be here to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do and how we are related or not related to county government, and share little insights about us. So I think the best place to start is with just a tad bit of history. So if we go to the next slide, what you'll see is Marathon County Special Education is actually a county disabilities or county children with disabilities education board, a CDEB. We're actually one of 4 in the state, and we were created statutorily under 115.817 to provide special education related services to the children originally in all of Marathon County, and today we provide those services to 6 of the rural consortium schools, which include Abbotsford, Athens, Edgar, Marathon, Rosholt, and Spencer. And below are a list of all of the various services that we provide. And just a smidge about how we work. These 6 schools pool their resources together, and then on behalf of those schools, we hire and place special education teachers, school psychologists, any manner of staff that might be needed to support the special education services in these rural schools. I do think the best way for us to share with you really who we are is just to watch a very brief video clip, if we could pull that up. I think, like Mr. Gibbs, I need a first grader to help. So,
Am I your first
no,
grader?
no. I need a first grader to help.
I've been called worse.
That's okay. I'm in special ed, so we'll pivot. This lovely little video, it's 3 minutes long if you have an opportunity. It's very heartfelt, and it's meant to depict exactly the kinds of services we provide. It's 3 minutes long. You can find it on our website at mcsc.k12.wi.us. But it really is about the staff who work with kids with disabilities and their passion for that work, and a little bit about how we're configured. A little bit about myself. This is my 35th year in education. 26 of those years have been working in rural schools here in Marathon County. And then the previous years just in the neighboring district over at Wittenberg-Bernowit. So I'm passionate about rural schools. I love rural schools, and that is what our agency is all about. But then I think what would also be helpful to understand our configuration and how we're related is if we look at go back to the PowerPoint, give you a little history review. There. So in 1951, this board was the first to hire one special education teacher for the entire county, which is saying something since we have hundreds of them now in the county. And then in 1957, the state law required the establishment of a county handicapped children's education board in all the counties. And later it became known as a CDEB. So at one time, all special education services in the state of Wisconsin were done under one county superintendent per county, and all services coming out of the county seat. And then after the establishment of that CDEB here in Marathon County, in 1958 we held our first ever board meeting, and we are celebrating 65 years of services since that time. But then, in 1987, we parted ways, and at that time, the county disabilities board, us, remained under your umbrella, but we separated for tax purposes. So previously, we were on your tax roll, and all of the schools in Marathon County were part of that CDEB. But then in 1987, I can't say that we divorced because we didn't. We separated amicably, and we no longer showed up on your actual tax roll. So if you go to the next slide, right now, as I mentioned, we maintain our own, we are independent. We are listed as a Marathon County Special Education as a department. That's not a department. We have our own board, we have our own structure, and our funding, just to give you a sense of how we are funded, comes from 3 different sources. The first and the largest chunk is actually from the school districts we serve. We charge the school districts in our consortium for those services. Then we get another 19% of state categorical aid, and then a very, very small amount in federal funding. And so, as I mentioned, we're one of 4, but of the 4 remaining CDEBs in the state of Wisconsin, we are the only one that has separated officially from the county board. The other 3 remain in the traditional way. But since 1987, we continue to show up as a line item on your budget, but you do not tax for us. And we can never really, really separate. We will be wedded forever in our amicable separation unless state statutes were to change, which is not anytime in the foreseeable future. Just another little tidbit about us. In 2018, we also became the home of the Birth to 3 for Lincoln Langland in Marathon County. And then in 2019, from the health department, we took on the vision and hearing screening for all schools, not just the 6 consortium schools that we serve, but all schools, private and parochial, for hearing and vision. So we get a lot of common questions. These are ones that come top of mind to people is, why don't all Marathon County schools still belong to a CDEB? And the answer is really quite simple. One, special ed got big when additional funding sources were coming in, and we went from 2 disability categories in 1958 to 13 now. The nature of special ed is just far more elaborate and robust, and larger districts had more resources, frankly, to be able to provide those services. The next question that we get is, why did the rural schools that I serve continue to stay in a consortium? And the answer really is financial and human resources. By pooling all of their resources together, they are able to provide a full complement of services that all of our larger neighbors get. I would also tell you that we have many, many partnerships with some of our neighbors, including Wausau, DC Everest, and Mosinee. So by pooling those resources, the small districts have the same ability to compete and to serve the students with disabilities. That brings me to why I'm here today before you. It is that time of year where we have to come to you because statutorily we're required when we have new board members that need to be approved, we have to bring those nominees to you, the larger board. We refer to you as the big C or the little C. And every 3 years, our staff, or our board members rather, serve a 3-year term. We are in a unique year where all 6 board members were due at the same time. That's a rarity, and there are many reasons why I arrived here. But to that, these are the 6 members from the various school districts that have been nominated or put forward by their local school boards. So what I'm hoping for today will be that you will unanimously approve their appointment to the board. Any questions, burning questions that you might have about us? Did I answer all the things I was hoping to answer, Lance? Did I get that?
Clear as mud as always.
Okay, good. All right, great.
Questions from the board?
Is there any questions?
Supervisor Rosenberg, please.
Some of the things you describe here seems to, the CISA 9 also does that stuff. How much of that interface is there between, is there any interface? And why is this set up this way and CISA 9 doing other things?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Just for bragging rights, we predate CISAs by 17 years, but that's just, a little fun fact. But CISAs are our friends and neighbors. What CISA does do is they also are a fee-for-service, so CISAs do also sell services to the school districts, all school districts. Things that come to mind are deaf, hard of hearing services, kids who need vision services, et cetera. In our case, all of the staff belong to Marathon County Special Ed and then are placed or located in the districts. And if I'm honest, I think we provide we're more affordable. But our districts also pool in a way that, like a CISA, if Edgar, for instance, I don't know where you hail from, but if you're in Edgar or you are in Marathon or Athens and you need orientation and mobility services for a child that has that need, you're going to pay for a certain number of days, for a certain number of months, et cetera. In our case, you get that service no matter how many days that you need. So every district gets everything. You don't purchase a number of days. My better example is behavioral consultants. We have students, amazingly enough, that have behavioral challenges. If you purchase that service from a CISA, you're going to get 12 days or 15 days. In our case, if Athens needs 2 weeks simultaneously, we can make that happen because my staff is Athens staff, is Edgar staff. So we overlap some. But we have differences in that we hire a wider array of staff. I don't know if I answered. Is that clear as mud also? Probably as clear as mud.
Yeah, I just remember I was on the CISA board.
Yeah, it's a great organization. And actually, you will have noticed another question you may have had is, well, Abbotsford doesn't actually sit in Marathon County, and nor does Roscoe. And the reason for that is also historically speaking is that when CDEBs were created, small communities could decide which CDEB they wanted to participate in. Wittenberg-Burnhamwood actually was part of this consortium at one time as well. So we're far and wide. But CISAs are our partners, and we work very collaboratively with them.
Okay, we're going to use our system request to speak. Supervisor Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned you're one of 4 in the state. Do you have any reason why there's not more?
I think for the reason why we talked about why do our 6 districts stay together in small rural areas, I think when special ed got big, the need for a joint or pooled set of services became less. For instance, Wausau is a large school district. They have the capacity to do all of it internally. We're unique in that well, obviously, you know, Marathon County is the largest geographical county in the state. And for the smaller districts to try to compete and have services at the same level that the larger districts do, they can't. So CDEBs went by when CESAs were created, and districts began to take on more responsibility for their local services. So that is why.
Follow up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had an additional question about the birth to 3 and vision hearing screening. So you're doing those pretty much through every school district in the county. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's a fee for that service? Is that correct?
Yes, if you if you want hearing and vision screening, all the districts, the 10 districts in Marathon County pay for those separately. There is no item on your tax roll for that.
Okay, and so then those have happened just recently. What were the schools doing prior to you starting these services, like in 2018, 2019?
Birth to 3 has been around for a really, really long time. It moved to departments. For a while, it was Birth to 3 was under the North Central Healthcare System. And when the restructuring happened, they needed a new home for Birth to 3, and we picked it up and transferred it to us. And similarly, hearing and vision was under the county health department, and we did the very same thing with that. We picked it up and put it under umbrella. Birth to 3, actually, just as a follow-up to that, is a 100% natural fit for us, because the school age services that we provide are all are under something called IDEA, the IDEA law. But birth to 3 is the same law. It's called Part C. So taking kids birth to 21 is just a very natural fit for us.
Okay, Supervisor Marash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question for clarification, and it might be more for Lance. I believe I heard in the Health and Human Services meeting that the Nurse Family Partnership funding affects the special education. Did I hear that right? Is this the same thing?
No, that's a different funding that I don't have the exact name, but I can get that for you for the next meeting. But it's not funding related to Kelly. As Kelly said, their funding comes through the school districts. It is kind of an artifact of statute is the only reason
Correct.
that Kelly comes to visit us.
And I'm happy to do it as often as you would like, but yes.
It's because the statute requires that the county board approve appointments. Those appointments are generated by each of the respective school districts that belong to special ed. But the special education funding that Kelly gets is different than the funding that you're talking about for Nurse Family Partnership, where some of our dollars we utilize for match for a different program that's mandated. But I can get that for you.
Think of me like a long-lost cousin, that you see only at the holidays, so.
Supervisor Sherfinsky, please.
Thank you, Chair. So my questions are more of a educational purpose to continue this dialogue. And from what I understand from the statutory purposes and the way that you've described it, this has evolved into being a cooperative venture, largely small school districts coming together to do something together that they could not do otherwise.
That is 100%. You said that way better than me. Yes, that's correct.
So my question then is, what is the oversight? Because one of the things that I see here is you're asking us to approve board members, but I see nothing here that's apparent at first glance that comes back to the voting citizens of Marathon County that holds you accountable. So what is the accountability process here? Who ultimately are you accountable to, and what is that functionality?
That is a good question. So the board members that you're hopefully going to approve today are my primary accountability. But if you also review the statute, you'll see that the advisory group that is statutorily required is made up of superintendents from each of these small districts. And so we have the 6 superintendents with whom I work on behalf of, and then the board, which are members of their boards or their constituency that they appoint to supervise me. And then I also have, in terms of oversight, I have accountability directly to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction with regard to budget, auditing practices. We also do special education audits on behalf of these schools. So we are, in many regards, in the state of Wisconsin, considered an intermediary school district, even though I don't have students. So there are many layers of oversight that happen. It just doesn't happen to be Lance. Did I answer that question well?
You did. Thank you very much, because we're being asked to approve some people, and the question always comes back to me is authority and responsibility, and if they don't balance, then alarm bells go off for me. So what you've now done is you've provided the responsibility side of that equation. Thank you very much.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson, please.
So along similar lines, how many students do you serve? Do you know what your cost per student is? And how does that compare to districts that don't subscribe to this consortium?
Oh my gosh.
And I know they're not your students.
Yes.
I mean, they're the students of those individual schools, but
Yes, we compare very favorably, and I wish I'd have known. I just provided the fiscal report to our board and to our superintendents recently. But in terms of cost per student, it varies depending on the district because we charge based on number of students that they have, even though all resources are pooled. But if you look at how we compare to our neighbors who are not part of the consortium or on a per pupil, we are very competitive. A little more in some areas, a little less in others. Obviously, sometimes, and this for those of you that pay attention to school finance, I'll use Athens as my example. You still need 2 teachers to teach 3rd grade, whether you have 10 kids or whether you have 40 kids. So sometimes the per pupil can look larger in Athens than it is in, say, Abbotsford. But yes, I have, and I did not come prepared with that, but if you wanted chapter and verse on that, I'd be happy to share that. And we actually chart that year over year and a half for the last 15 years.
And the reason I ask, and I guess I should be completely open, I'm on the Stratford School Board. I've been on there for 12 years. And we do not subscribe to the consortium. We left that in 2002, 2003, and actually we found several $100,000 cost savings to our district. And so I guess what I would say is we've been performing well, I think, without the services of the county consortium. And so I'm not going to be negative to the work that you're doing, and I understand certain districts are interested in kind of doing a co-op. I understand that. And I understand that additionally the money is not from our levy. It's coming through these sources because eventually you have to zero out at the end of the year. And we know the struggles in school districts where you're pulling a lot of your money out of your general fund to serve those things. So I guess my overall comment is I would have some concerns that we would have a co-op for 6 of our districts, since how many other districts? I think we have portions of 10 other districts that are in our county that don't subscribe. So again, it's just a general comment. I appreciate the work that you do. It's very difficult work. The budget looks like it's going to be good for special education a little bit next biennium and a couple of percentage points, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Yes, thank you.
So, thank
And just as a interesting fun fact, I began my career in Stratford as a school psychologist there in I won't tell you, but 35 years ago. So Stratford is very near and dear to my heart, and I was there when the divorce happened. So it's challenging time. But we also compare often, because we get that question a lot with regard to Stratford. And so, but the data exists, and I would be happy to share it as public information.
Any other discussion? Any other questions? If not, thank you, Kelly, for a great presentation.
I promised 8 minutes and 30 seconds, and I really went over, so I apologize.
Okay, next we have education presentations by standing committee chairpersons or designees. Any standing committee? Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Just want to give a quick update on the June 1st, 2023 Infrastructure Committee meeting. We started out, we had a presentation from Brian Graffey, the Director of Central Wisconsin Airport, on the 2024 budgets that's being discussed at the airport. The terminal area master plan, which focuses on expansions of everything except the terminal with the buildings around it. There's no plans to expand the main terminal. It was remodeled 7 years ago. Airport has 1,800 acres, or 1,800 acres, 2 runways, one being 7,700 feet and the other one 6,500 feet. The master plan that they are discussing has 4 options, and the board will be looking at those options. We continue discussion on the 2024 annual budget. We had discussions on mandatory and non-mandated services, and that will continue moving on at next meeting. We got an update from Kevin Lang and Jim Griesbach from the Highway Department on the 2023 summer construction projects. They gave an update on the culvert on Highway KK, which washed out. That's been repaired. The road was closed for several weeks, but I believe it's open now. They're going to start on the mowing sometime later in June. They're working on Highway S. They're doing a lot of milling. They'll start at the county line and work up to Highway 29, and they'll start paving on June 12th. The bridge crews will be starting with a bridge replacement on Highway H in the town of Halsey, just north of 29. Also Highway K project, which is a fully federal funded project. The biggest part of that project is the intersection at Highway WW. That's going to be reconstructed as a roundabout. They received some AD 20 funding on County Highway J Bridge, a half a mile south of G, and 100% funding on bridge in County P in Fenwood, by Fenwood Creek. We also had a discussion and approved allocation of funding for staffing assistance for the broadband task force, which Supervisor Robinson and Jerry Klein went over and explained it, and we'll be discussing this at the full board. Jim Griesbach updated the County Safety Commission meeting that they had on May 3rd. So far, since January 1st, there's been 2 fatalities in Marathon County, one in the city of Wausau, one in the town of Halsey. There was a serious crash on Highway 97 between Marshfield and Stratford. They completed their spring cleanup. During the cleanup, they did find a 9mm pistol, so if anybody's missing one, that was turned into the Sheriff's Department. And that is it quickly for the infrastructure meeting. I would like to update you on the Forensic Science Center. On June 2nd, we received information from Representative Schneider's office that the Building Commission has awarded $7 million for the Forensic Science Center. So we're whittling away at it, and we'll continue to move forward, but that's the latest on the Forensic Science Center. Are there any questions?
And there's not a lot of debate because this is not, this is just education.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the only question that I have is, you touched upon the airport board and thought processes there for planning purposes. I guess 2 questions. Over the last 3 to 5 years, what are the number of flights that are actually coming in on a daily basis, and what are the actual number of passengers that we're handling? And I don't expect that you have that.
Well, that was not covered, but I know there are some board members on here that are on the airport board. Supervisor Dickinson.
Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
The only thing I would say is if you wanted that specific information, reach out to Director Griefy. We talk about those every month in our meeting. I will say that load capacity for one of the airlines is 92% and the other is about 74%. So right now we're seeing a significant amount of persons taking our flights. And I do believe they just announced today that there's going to be another flight that's going to be added in to make it 5 flights. It was at 1.11, but it's at 5. So, but the specific numbers, like I said, every month we get them. So I'd say reach out to Director Griefy.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
The other thing that was mentioned was that the aircraft that is being flown now has more seat capacity. And what was at least mentioned at the Infrastructure Committee meeting was that the number of seats are still available by the 2 airlines that are currently running is the same as there was when there were multiple additional flights. So, because they're flying bigger planes. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Sherfinsky, if you do look in the budget book, there's information at least through the time of the budget. We try to track 2 things for the airport that are, as Supervisor Dickinson said, top of mind for the airport board and airport leadership, and plane passengers and passenger facility charges. So at least through the budget, if you're just looking for historical trends, I'm looking at the 2023 budget, we had data on it, both those 2 data points going back to 2018. Perfect.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you. Just wanted to update you on some of the discussions that are taking place at the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee. We had Molly, the Human Resources Director, give us an update relative to recruitment retention. The good news is we've got a 20% decrease in turnover over the last year to year. However, we're still 65% over where we were in 2020, pre-pandemic. So we've got people are leaving for employment, retirement, and other factors. And some of the critical issues when they leave it's flexibility, culture, and what our benefit package, holistic benefit package looks like. The 5% increase that we did with the wage comp study has had a positive impact. However, we continue to be concerned relative to the turnover rate. We're evaluating at the committee level, modifying the work week, looking at what other communities like Rib Mountain, Rothschild, Washington County, and others are doing relative to a expanded Monday through Thursday workday and an abbreviated schedule on Friday. We currently have a number of departments that are working 410s, highway, parks. We have Sheriff's Department with 12-hour shifts that are 24/7 operations, so it's a little bit different, but we are evaluating that, and we will be looking at potentially developing some recommendations for your consideration at a later date to increase our flexibility and hopefully our attractiveness as an employer so we can get our numbers back down to the 2020 level. The county clerk, Kim Trueblood, has been experimenting with expanded hours on these county board nights. They offer appointments to the public to come in for marriage licenses, passports on a scheduled basis. That's gone over very well and proves that people like to have those expanded hours so that they can service it. And Friday afternoons are never busy in this building. So if we're looking at providing good customer service, it would make sense to look at an expanded 4-day work week in abbreviated 5th day. I wanted to just update you relative to ARPA discussions. We are in the process of trying to reconcile our past approvals with projected expenditures. Marathon County has received $26.3 million in ARPA funds. We've committed to date 21.8. We're not likely to spend all of that. We had 10.3 million put into highway projects that we later found out would not be eligible for general transportation aid. So those projects have not moved ahead. So we're right now we will at the July meeting have that reconciliation in, and you look at the budget priorities, we're looking at committing a good portion of that encumbered balance toward capital projects going forward, but we'll have information at the July meeting.
Okay. Any other announcements and or presentations by standing committee chairpersons or designees? Okay, we'll move on We'll move on to review and discussion on the Tuesday meeting agenda items, and we'll start with appointments under 9A1, Board of Adjustment.
Reappointing the following individuals to the Marathon County Board of Adjustment for 3-year terms to expire June 30th, 2026. Carolyn Opitz of Marshfield and Carrie Brimmer of Mosinee as a first alternate.
Any discussion? Any questions? Okay, item 9A2, Children with Disabilities Education Board.
These are appointments and reappointments of the following individuals to serve on the Marathon County Children with Disabilities Education Board, effective July 1, 2023, with their terms expiring June 30, 2026. Gary Gunderson, Abbotsford School District, a reappointment. Lori Haynes, Athens School District, a reappointment. Allison Reinders, Edgar School District, a new appointment. Jacqueline Hankey, Marathon City School District, a new appointment. Carol Schultz, Rosholt School District, reappointment. And Barb Wessel of Spencer School District, a new appointment.
Any questions on those appointments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 9A4, Social Services Board. Excuse me, item 3, City County IT Commission.
The City County IT Commissioners met on June 6, 2023 to reappoint Chet Strebe, CIO at North Central Technical College, as the citizen member of the City County IT Commission for a 2-year term beginning June 1, 2023 and expiring on May 31st, 2025.
Any questions on that appointment? Okay, and then we'll go to 9A4, Social Services Board.
Appointing Elizabeth Robinson of Wausau to the Social Services Board to complete a 2-year term to expire April 2024, replacing Christy Keel.
Questions on that appointment? All right, moving on to ordinances under 9B1, Town of McMillan rezone, Josh Prentice, REI Engineering for Larry Sauer. Ordinance 18-23. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 9B2, Town of Marathon rezone, Jason Pfluger for Michael Kellenhauser. Ordinance 0-19-23. Any questions? Okay, then we'll move on to item 9B3, the creation of the Marathon County Tax Incremental Financing Task Force, Ordinance 20-23. Questions? Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've struggled with this topic for a little over a month now. I do tend to overthink some things. But I voted no in the HRFP meeting to bring this forward to the full board, and I felt like I was criticized. Maybe, again, I'm overthinking that. So I had to kind of do some thinking on why did I feel that way, and I think it's because I had voted yes for a previous task force and probably was licking my wounds for not having that one go forward. And so I decided I better go back to my constituency and just check and see what do they want, because it's not about what I want, it's about who I represent. And so I talked to probably 4 or 5 different people from my district, and they didn't know really much about TIF at all. And I think what's unknown is oftentimes criticized, and one person even said to me, it's so controversial, we just shouldn't do TIF. And I thought, okay, well, that seems a little simplistic. So I decided I'd go visit some city people, and I talked to a few alders, and I talked to some people who work at the city and who own businesses downtown. You know, again, I do tend to overthink this, so I've talked to a lot of people. And the city's perspective really, when I asked, you know, why do we do it and what would happen if we didn't do it anymore, they pretty much said the consensus was this is the only tool we have to bring in redevelopment, to revitalize areas, to make our communities livable and the preferred place to live, work, play, and do business. They said if you take it away, which we don't have the jurisdiction to do that, they said if you take it away, what are you going to replace it with? Because let's face it, this is private businesses are not chomping at the bit to buy some of these properties. And I looked downtown. I was just down walking the Riverwalk, which I love. There were bikers, there were walkers, there were groups of children playing at the playground. There were at least 4 groups of people buying ice cream at the ice cream shop. So there's more benefit to TIF than just property tax. There's sales tax, there's jobs. And the mall property that's kind of sitting there languishing right now, I worked at the mall, so I know in its heyday, it gave some of those benefits to our place. But, you know, when I taught 8th graders, I would say to them, when you're doing research, you have to have sources that are not biased, and you have to have experts. So who are the experts on economic development? Well, I called some people at the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. They certainly would be experts, and they're independent. And one of them told me something that's really resonated with me. She said, if you look at the charter and you look at the information that this charter is asking for, it is going to take the analysis of decades of financials. And who's going to do that? And I think, you know, I have all the trust in the world in Christie, but we're struggling right now to get financials for the HRFP committee because of the challenges with Workday and some other things. So who's going to do that? And then second, she pointed out to me, my WEDC contact, she said, if we go to a consultant, who can get the information, because the information is out there, it will cost tens of thousands of dollars, and this does not have a fiscal impact associated with it. So I had to go back again and do some soul searching. Am I true to my mission? And I think, yeah, I am. I believe in education. I want education. I asked about a year ago for a TIF 101 class, and I've studied it, and I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I've asked a lot of questions. But I perceive some mistrust in this board, and I think if the education is done in a task force where meetings might not be easily accessible, I fear that the report that's driven may be received with suspicion. So I would like to see the education done whole group. There are people in our area who are experts who have offered to come to our board to talk to us, and I would prefer a whole group education similar to what we did with the housing study.
Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to stand up in the corner because maybe I'll make it look like there's more people on this side of the room. My fellow colleagues, I believe that the creation of this task force is a common sense measure to address something that's becoming very popular in our county, and that's the use of tax incremental financing. I have a number of notes here that I'm going to go through this evening, so please bear with me. I'd like to take some time to explain why I believe there is a need for this task force, and really I'm going to do that by 2 ways. I'm going to explain how TIFs operate, and I'm going to explain what TIFs look like in Marathon County. I'm not an expert in all things TIF, like a lot of you in here. I'm not an economic development director. I don't work for WEDC, but I have a computer with access to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue's website with tax incremental financing information on it. So over the course of the past couple days, I decided to go onto that webpage and educate myself. I will just say it is a tremendous resource. In between now and Tuesday, I would encourage you all to take a look at it. There's a lot of great information on it. I consulted the Tax Incremental Financing Manual, the 2023 Active TID Report, and the 2022 Statement of Changes in the TID value, or in TID values. So, Mr. Chair, like I said, I'd like to just take a moment to review how the tax incremental district works. And I think the first thing I want to do is explain that there is a difference between TIF and TID, because a lot of times those terms are used interchangeably and they're not the same. In that Tax Incremental Financing Manual, the DOR defines TIF as an economic development technique used to expand the property tax base. Property value increases fund site improvements that would not otherwise occur. A tax incremental district, on the other hand, or a TID, is the actual physical area, whole parcels, designated for improvements using tax incremental financing. And really, I think the way that you can think about that is that tax incremental financing is essentially the method or the tool that communities are using for economic development. And a TID is really the impacted area itself. So the way that TIDs operate is that they lock in a base property value within that area that the municipality wishes to develop. That property value is subject to all of the overlying taxing jurisdictions, which would include the municipality itself, the town, village, or the city in this case, the school districts, the technical colleges, and the county. The town, city, or village identifies projects to encourage and facilitate that desired development. So they've identified an area they'd like to develop, and then they identify projects in order to improve that area. So in theory, TID is a great concept because over time, as the property values increase, the municipality uses the property taxes paid on that development to pay for projects that they've previously identified. That growth in value is referred to as an increment. And remember that because I'm going to be talking a lot about increments in a couple pages here. So the school districts, technical colleges, and county do not receive any tax dollars from the increment, but they do receive tax dollars from the base. There's a really great graph in that tax increment manual from the DOR where they basically have the base itself, where they have the 4 taxing jurisdictions portioned out, and then when it goes above that base value, when you get to the increment itself, all those tax dollars flow back to the community to finance those projects. Once the TID is closed, the other taxing jurisdictions are able to levy taxes on the value of the new development. But it's important to note that for the increment itself, those overlying taxing jurisdictions beyond the municipality, they don't get to levy anything there. There's value that is not seen in the eyes of the county, the school district, and the technical colleges. So that's essentially how TID works. Researching what TIDs look like in Marathon County, here's what I found out. So in 2023, there are 40 active tax incremental districts in Marathon County. To break it down by municipality, 1 out of the 40 towns that are within our county have a TID. Now, that's likely due to the limited statutory authority for town governments to have tax incremental districts. I believe in the entire state of Wisconsin, there's only 16 towns out of the 1,267 towns that actually have a tax incremental district. 11 out of our 15 villages have a TID. Granted, we do have some villages and cities that cross the county line, so bear with me with that number. I did the best I could with that. And then 5 out of 6 cities have a tax incremental district. Some communities only have 1 TID, but the majority have several. As I mentioned earlier, TIDs are closed after a certain amount of time. There is no general lifespan, as each TID's lifespan depends on certain characteristics. And to determine the lifespan, you have to consult the DOR's, I love this title, the Tax Incremental District Criteria Matrix. Great name. That matrix essentially looks at things like the type of TIF and when the TIF was created to determine its lifespan. The minimum number of years that I saw in that matrix was 20 years. So we're not talking 5 or 6, we're talking decades here. Municipalities will also go to the state legislature to lobby them to increase the lifespan of a TID. That's not that uncommon. Of the 40 active TIFs in Marathon County, there are only 6 that are scheduled to be closed this decade. 13 of the 40 have had their closing deadlines extended. The oldest is located, and I'm not here to pick on communities, I want to make that clear. The oldest is located in the city of Schofield and has been in place since 1994. It was supposed to be closed by April 4th, 2021, but was extended to April 4th, 2031. In the course of its lifespan, the increment, meaning the value that went beyond its base, $17,312,100. Like I said, I'm not here to pick on or criticize our communities. What I'm trying to convey is that there's a lot of property value that's been locked in at base for the county for a long time. 30 of the 40 TIDs were created a decade or more ago. So, next question, of course. Well, how much value is included in all those increments, right, beyond the base that we have? So, remember that it varies across communities, I guess the best way I can say it. There's actually 2 TIDs that have negative growth since they were created, which I think is another great reason for this task force. You know, why do we have communities that have negative TID growth? For the sake of our discussion tonight and Tuesday, I'm not going to go through all the values for all 40 TIDs. I do have them in my notebook here. If you want to know them, you can see me after the meeting. You can also just look at the DOR's website. So the total increment in Marathon County, beyond the base, remember, the total increment that has been growing across all these 40 TIDs, I'm glad you all are sitting down, $1,070,800,800, over $1 billion. I was shocked when I added up all those numbers. I almost fell out of my chair, folks. Now, that is value that the county, technical colleges, and school districts do not see. Over $1 billion of property value. My next question, of course, was, well, yeah, it's a big number, but is that the norm? So I decided to look at Portage County. They have 18 TIDs. Their total increment is $605,947,800, and we're over $1 billion. So to get back to the first point here, as far as why do I think the task force is needed? So I think that TID is in play, while the TIDs are in place, you know, the county is still providing services to their communities. To give you an example, I live next to a village, and there are TIDs within that community. If we have social services that are provided within that TID, or let's say that we have a police call and the village responds, but they need assistance from the county, we're providing service to that area. But we're not fully realizing the value of those tax dollars. You know, essentially what I'm trying to say, folks, is that they're not fully paying for that service. And I don't believe that's fair. You know, instead, those tax dollars that are paid beyond the base are stuck in those communities. And I think we need to start thinking about this as an organization, because if you look at the task force itself, the charter, the purpose of the task force isn't to bash TIFs. It's not. Really, the purpose of this task force is to understand how we as an organization are supposed to operate with over $1 billion stuck beyond the base. I think that's the value of this task force itself. There's an opportunity for Marathon County to start having conversations with local leaders as far as how TIF is affecting us. You know, we all got an email this afternoon from the village administrator from the Village of Marathon City. I fully believe that email is clearly asking for municipalities to be brought into this conversation. Let's have it by creating this task force. Lastly, I think we all need to be clear, like I said earlier, that the intent behind this task force is not to bash TIFs. We as stewards of public funds must understand how we're supposed to operate in this environment. TIFs aren't going away. I mean, if you look at the activity in the state legislature just this session, if anything, they're going to be expanded. So, Mr. Chair, fellow colleagues, this is an opportunity for education and engagement. There's a need. It's common sense. I'd urge you all to support the creation of the TIF Task Force on Tuesday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we have Supervisor Covelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to read the comments from the Village of Marathon City. Thank you, Supervisor Langenhahn, for the data and the information. The Village of Marathon City would like to submit the following facts and questions to the Marathon County Board as part of the June 15, 2023 educational meeting related to the proposed TIF Task Force. The discussions on the proposed Tax Increment Finance Task Force began March 8, 2023, and despite known concerns of Marathon County municipalities have not included any of the 17 municipalities that make up the 40 active TIDs in Marathon County. Many of the goals identified for the proposed TIF Task Force are educational in nature, and there's a great opportunity for education and better understanding of TID and TIF. In fact, multiple municipalities have offered to facilitate sessions specifically on TID and TIF proctored by industry municipalities, proctored by industry professionals, similar to what Supervisor Leibrandt just said in her comments. There's been no response to these offers. I had offered a couple of months ago, or several months ago, in an email to the chair, to have somebody come in and do an educational session on TID and TIF districts. And the response was that Supervisor Robinson was working on it. So I left it. And now we have this ordinance in front of us. Several of the proposed goals are data collection, consolidated, and analysis tasks. This could be accomplished by prioritizing this as a staff request. In fact, all the data that Supervisor Langenhahn provided, I have here and off of the website, which only takes a couple of hours to produce. You don't need a task force to do that. Tax increment districts and tax increment financing are complex tools. They're used by municipalities to foster economic development in Marathon County and statewide. A lack of knowledge of how TIDs and TIF work and the laws that govern them have led to serious misrepresentations of the law and accusations against the municipalities that have successfully utilized TIF. TIF is governed by state statute. The roles of the taxing entities, including the county, are defined. Several of the policy issues outlined for the proposed TIF task force are beyond the statutory authority of the county. An ad hoc survey, 30 minutes at a time, of 8 Wisconsin counties found none have a formally constituted subgroup of the County Board of Supervisors focused on TIF. County board members should be asking questions regarding the proposed TIF task force. Given that municipal staff is dedicated to day-to-day administration of municipal TIDs and the use of TIF by municipalities in Marathon County for economic development, why were no municipalities included in the discussion? Why have offers to provide educational sessions on TID and TIF provided by industry experts not been pursued? If there are specific questions as referred to in the proposed resolution and ordinance, and if these questions are critical to Marathon County, why have these questions not been prioritized and assigned to county staff? Why is the TIF task force being proposed if the majority of the tasks can be accomplished through a combination of engagement with the industry professionals, Department of Revenue experts, and the prioritization of staff work plans? Should a formation of a TIF task force really be a priority for Marathon County? Ultimately, the questions being asked about TID-TIF, clarity on TID-TIF, and addressing the misconceptions and misrepresentations of TID and TIF in Marathon County can be addressed efficiently without the formation of a task increment financing task force. It simply requires an engagement by the county with the 17 municipalities and professionals with knowledge and experience with TIDs and TIFs. Again, I said, this data that Supervisor Langenhahn provided only takes a couple hours to produce. So I'm against the TIF task force. I'm against growing government. And I would like us to, it seems like we've put the cart before the horse with this ordinance. And instead of engaging the municipalities, I think we need to back up a little bit and get an educational session in place and to talk to the municipalities before we implement this. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. TIDs are statutorily driven, and there are excessive statutes that seem to be changed on a somewhat regular basis that limit the amount of property that can go into it, the total amount within a community. But the issue before us today is, what's the county's role when we have the Joint Review Board meeting? We have a seat at the table. Currently, that seat is occupied by Christy Palmer, the finance director, who isn't sure what criteria we should be applying when we're reviewing those, the creation of those or extension of those tax increment districts. There are many occasions where communities go to the legislature to extend the life of the TIF or extend the valuation without consulting us. as a county board, and whether or not it is meritorious to extend the life of those districts or extend the valuation within it. We, as a taxing entity, are impacted through the creation of TIFs, and TIFs do serve a very real and have a profound impact on communities in terms of blight elimination and redevelopment. Nobody argues that. I think the issue that we're searching for is what is the county's role? And we've been talking about this at the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee for 3+ years. Don't have the time at a committee level to do that, to develop that understanding and develop recommendations. Understanding that our ability to impact state statutes is limited. We have the bully pulpit that we could use based upon the results that we may have, but hopefully developing an understanding and a mutual understanding of what's going on. Those communities, have not come to us when they've looked for expansion or changes to the statutes to expand those TIFs or other things. So this task force brings or gives them a seat at the table while we discuss what the implications of TIF are on our constituents. And Peter Weinschenk did a very good job of outlining some of the concerns and the various political philosophies behind it. But TIFs do have an impact upon the rest of the tax-paying community because we're shifting those taxes that would have been paid to others. Now, granted, there's a potential increase in sales tax to the county that may offset a portion of that. It would be nice to know what those impacts are, but it would also be nice at the end of the day to know who should represent the county at the TIFs, what criteria should we use when we're evaluating the creation, extension, expansion of TIFs, and what is the long-term benefit to the taxpayers of the county. I've had a number of discussions with Jim Rosenberg over the years. I think he's looking for and advocates for term sheets or conditions that give us an overview of what the TIFs are, how they're going to perform, what the expenditures are. I voted for them when I was on the city council. I've supported them as mayor. I've written tax increment finance plans for the village of Athens in a previous life. So I'm very familiar with TIFs, but there are opportunities for us to go in more educated and have an informed decision and to clarifying the role of the county when it comes to future TIFs. If there are only 6 that are going to lapse or come to an end this decade, we need to know, if they go for an extension, what impact does that have on the county, and what role should we have in communicating those concerns when those extensions are requested. That's what we're looking for. TIFs are valuable. The task force creates seats at the table for those communities to come forward and have that discussion.
Supervisor Stravinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Everybody thus far has brought out a lot of good information, both pro and con. TIFs have been a valuable tool, no doubt. I think Wausau, as I've lived here my entire life, I've watched some of the impact, and certainly very positive. However, I think what's very clear is that, like many other tools, sometimes we go to that well too often. But we as a county board don't even really have a seat at that table. That's not, it's state statute, it's municipalities, we're not involved in that. So you can look at this task force from 2 standpoints, one of which is, does it actually do anything? The real question here is, there are a couple real questions if I look at this. One is, are TIFs being overused by the municipalities within Marathon County, including the city of Schofield? Full disclosure. Maybe we are. I think that's certainly a likelihood. It's very easy to get caught up in something, and the so-called experts in the process are very good and very knowledgeable, and it's very easy to sway public opinion. Wausau's doing it, Schofield's doing it, Weston's doing it. Well, you should do it too. So I think that's part of why we've seen such an explosive growth and perhaps overutilization of the tool. Because what happens is we've now taken improved property values off the table, not for 1 year or 5 year, but for decades. And that, quite frankly, is why we, Marathon County, kind of look at the budgeting process and go, we don't have the dollars that we would like to have or feel that we should have. But we can't affect that either. We have very limited capabilities to influence any decision-making process. I do think that there's something to be said for the value of perhaps having the task force. I could support it if it has a sunset limitation.
Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Supervisor Lemmer's comments about, task force and, you vote for one, you don't vote for another. You're trying, what is your focus on what is the value of a task force is what it comes down to. And when I think of myself of a task force, I think that you have to have an issue that you have to address and have to solve. Broadband task force, issue, solve it. Regional morgue, issue, solve it. I don't see the issue that we can solve on the county level with this. It's educational. I certainly appreciate Mr. Weinschenk coming here, past editor of Record Review. He did an article, I believe it was last year, a series of articles about TIFs, which was helpful to me. I appreciate Supervisor Longenhahn sharing this information as well. We don't know everything, and these kinds of issues are difficult to understand. It seems to me what it says here, the task force is the goal of making recommendations to policies and processes that the county may pursue in relation to TIDs. Well, it's not under our jurisdiction. So the suggestion seems to be that if we find we're not getting enough money from these communities that have them, how do we deal with that? Chair Gibbs has spoken often about the relationship our county has with our municipalities and how that relationship is very delicate and has to be managed. If there's a suggestion that somehow a recommendation would be we need to do something about this to get more revenue from these municipalities that have this, that's a concern. I would also add the comment, an additional point is, if we do go down this road, as Supervisor Robinson said, maybe using the bully pulpit, well then I would like us to use our advocacy for other issues that we don't have the power to change. One of them is actually happening in Western Marathon County right now and has to do with wind turbine systems, where we have been having discussions in meetings and outside of meetings and have been told that there is nothing that we can do. Well, we could use our bully pulpit. We could use issues of health and safety, the positives and negatives about these systems, and talk to the state about changing it. So the way I stand is task force have to be direct, necessary to address a problem. I don't think this does that. I think it's educational, which is important. Number two, if we do go forward with it, then let's do another task force. And let's address some of these other issues where we have the bully pulpit. Thank you.
Supervisor Longenhahn.
I want to highlight one thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The county does have a representative on the Joint Review Board. So at the very least, we could be looking at what sort of criteria they can be given to make decisions on that governing body. That is clearly something we could be doing here. And I just want to say, someone else mentioned this earlier about the shifting of that taxing burden onto other places. I come from 3 towns. None of them have tax incremental districts. Guys, there's $1 billion in property value that's just sitting out there, money that keeps going back into the community while we keep providing services to them. That might sound like I'm bashing TIFs. I'm not. I'm simply pointing out the facts as I see them. This is common sense. Thank you.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
I'll be supporting this. I think the TIF districts are a valuable tool. I know that they're abused, but I'm wondering, either from you, Kurt, or Lance, what's the counties association doing about it? Our situation here with TIFs is not unique. It's across the state, and the state legislature has allowed them to extend them and has allowed them to change their boundaries, do donor districts, and the people that created those districts threw that football 17, 20 years ahead. They're not on those city councils anymore. They're holding the bag for something that happened, is the county's association or anybody else doing anything statewide?
I would have to look into it. I know we have a platform on it. The Wisconsin Counties Association has a platform on it. I know that the Wisconsin Counties Association supported when the Wisconsin legislature did a study council on TIFs and TIDs, and there was some proposed legislation that was moved forward. That was a couple of sessions ago, but that fell. Those fell by the wayside. So right now, I don't have a total answer on the potential expansion that they're talking about as far as bringing in a different form of TID, and that is for housing. But there is discussions at least at the Wisconsin Counties Association. Supervisor Sandusky.
I'd just like to thank all those for all the comments that have been presented here, and I'm not real sure right now because I'm not totally educated on this TIF and TID district stuff, but I think we need to. I don't think the task force is the way to go about it, because I feel like you're just getting more and more task force, more and more committees and all this stuff. I think we need to, if we're going to look into it, do it at the full board, have people come here do presentations on this, and educate the full board, and then they can make decisions upon what we can possibly do with these TID and TIF districts. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I will make a couple of comments. One of the things that I see is, again, and I think some of the supervisors have clearly stated, we're not here, I don't believe I'm here sitting there saying that any of the municipalities have done anything wrong. They've all followed the legislation, legal legislation, and the tools that they had. I've had a discussion with several different administrators in various villages and that have TIDs. And I said, look, I think there's an educational opportunity, and I think there's a discussion opportunity with us and them, meaning, is there opportunities for enhancement between cooperative agreements where the county can agree that development needs to happen, but that we share in that responsibility rather than being simply one-sided and the increment is off limits to the county for the next 20, maybe 30 years. We look at and again, this is not a reflection of saying that the TID is bad, but the economic reality of the TID that was created in the city of Wausau. In the 80s, the tax incremental district for the mall was created, and a few short years ago, 7-8 years ago, it came out of a TID district. And at the time when the value of the mall was declining, and again, it's not a reflection on what happened. I'm just trying to have a discussion with the municipalities and saying, is there a better way? Now, lo and behold, that area or that property is back in a TID. And so how much did the county receive in value increase? Granted, there's economic development or economic activity that took place that the county shared in sales tax and that type of thing. So there is some offset. But what is that amount? Do we know? No, we don't know. So, I believe that supporting the task force in getting the answers to these questions, giving the guidance and the criteria to the individual that sits on the board of review, and who that person should be is what the task force would be charged with. And I believe that is a valuable use of the task force because if you try to do that outside of a task force, you're not bringing equal partners into the fold to be able to vote. And that's what the task force does. It brings municipalities and/or business leaders to the table to have an equal vote on the task force as recommendations moving forward to the board. Any other discussion? Okay, we will move on. Under resolutions, Public Safety Committee, a staffing agreement for operations of the Marathon County Jail. Supervisor Marash, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I did it kind of last minute when you gave one last opportunity. So I just had a question about the membership. Being 9 members, 5 county board members, 2 elected officials, 1 representative from local taxing districts, and 1 business community representatives. So I was curious as to why only 1 representative from local taxing district and 1 business community representative based on Supervisor Cavelli's comments.
John, you want to?
I think there's just concern over the size. If you have we wanted to make sure that there were enough county board members because, again, we're directing county behavior in evaluation. If you have a suggestion, we'd certainly entertain it.
Follow up, I don't necessarily have a recommendation other than that it would be good to hear from the people that are experiencing it and living it right now. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson.
Yeah. So given that membership, how does that reconcile with your statement, Chair, where you're saying that there would be equal representation with the local municipalities? It doesn't seem like if there's only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, I don't see where that's equal.
I didn't say equal. I said they would give them voice. It would give them voice to the task force, voting voice to the task force. Supervisor Cavelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to follow up on your comment about the county representative on the, I don't remember the name.
Joint Review Board?
Joint Review Board. I would rather see us, instead of a task force, have the municipalities actually reach out to that representative instead of going through a task force, being the middleman. And you know, maybe working with that representative so, you know, at least that representative gets information directly from the source. Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move on then to resolution, Public Safety Committee, a staffing agreement for the operation of the Marathon County Jail. Resolution 33-23. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item 9C2, Human Resources and Finance and Property Committee, a resolution establishing the 2024 budget priorities and guidelines, resolution 28-23. Discussion. Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to go over what the Human Resources Committee did with the recommendations. And there were a series of recommendations. And remember, ultimately, relative to the adoption of the 2024 budget, the ultimate arbitrator is the county board and the members herein. I'm going to break it down into topical areas. In terms of, there was a recommendation that we look at total tax. The committee rejected the proposed change. First of all, our levy increase is tied into the net new construction, but the total tax levy is dependent upon a number of other things, including tax increment districts that may come to an end, although there aren't many, bridge and culvert aid, library funding, and other sources. And we think that it adds uncertainty and confusion. We can't control bridge and culvert aid. That's based upon the requests that we get from local units of government, and thought that the net new construction was a limiter. In terms of nonprofits, we accepted the whereas language, reflecting the discussion that took place as part of the 2023 budget process. but then we amended the resolve that a standing committee with jurisdiction of nonprofit agencies are called upon to bring recommendations to the full board relative to continued funding. It's consistent with what the Public Safety Committee has been doing to date, and I know that a number of the other committees either have scheduled some of those nonprofits or are in the process of scheduling them to bring them in, and we're looking for those committees to develop recommendations going forward. In terms of debt management, there was a specific reference to the County Ordinance 151, Parent 5. We expanded that language to include all of our policies, including capital planning, use of debt, length of debt, timing, bond issues, capitalized interest, debt limits, and capacities, debt guarantees, conduit funding, et cetera. We think all of those policies should be reflected when we go into the budget in funding our capital. In terms of employee compensation, there was a request that we put a maximum limit of 3% on employee compensation. That was accepted by the committee. Again, in operating expenses, tying the increase in the operational budget to total tax levy, we to the increase in net new construction for reasons above the total tax levy. Again, it has other factors that go into it. In terms of standing committees, we rejected the request for equal consideration. The board is the ultimate arbitrator of the funds, and there are committees that potentially have we're looking for committees of jurisdiction and versus other committees. And, I know that at the infrastructure committee there have been discussions of policies within other areas that are outside their discussion. I would just request that you give us the opportunity to see how this works this year. In terms of debt use, there was a request that we earmark $8 to $10 million of ARPA funds for the new highway facility to extend it. That did not come through a committee. It's not been vetted. It was not part of the West Side Master Plan. There are site limitations that the Infrastructure Committee has recognized in the past. And we think that those types of recommendations are not necessarily governing policies, but rather specific recommendations or inclusions in the budget. At the present time, I don't believe that there is any plan that would call for expenditure in the 2024 budget for that highway facility, but that's always obviously subject to change. And finally, relative to Danny Committee review, we incorporated the changes that were recommended relative to the mandated and discretionary services, the rates and fees document, and the 5-year departmental expense in the levy document.
Okay, Supervisor Sandulski, please.
Yeah, I just got a few questions, and in light of our more transparent budget process, I have a few questions and a request for Administrator Leonard. It's pertaining to our health insurance plan here for Marathon County employees. My first question would be, what is the process for gathering bids for our health insurance plan? And does this go through does this go through the HR finance or another entity within our county? And as being more transparent in our budget process, I also would like to request Administrator Leonard to provide the county board with 3 written estimates from like 3 different insurance carriers, providing the board with amount of coverage, costs, and overall comparable value. This way we can look at the best value for our taxpayers and our employees alike. And also the board can also be more informed in this process.
Well, first off, the county does use a consultant. The consultant does go out and solicits bids for our health insurance and makes recommendations to the county board or to the HR Finance Committee and administration. So it is vetted and it is available for information for everyone to review. Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. First off, I want to thank the HR Finance Committee for thoroughly reviewing and considering the changes that were proposed. So thank you for that. Tonight, I only want to comment on one item, which is that debt use. The proposed language was per county debt management policy. In light of the recent rapid increase in county debt, the proposed budget should consider, was an earmark, should consider utilizing $8 million to $10 million of ARPA funds to extend the life of the current highway department facilities on West Street. So both with the comments here tonight and the comments at HR Finance, this was considered not an appropriate place to put that item. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. However, a year and a half ago, I submitted a request to use ARPA funds to suspend $10 million of wheel tax for 4 years. I submitted that through the web portal. It was never formally considered at HR Finance. It never was considered anywhere at committee, any committee or on the board, as far as I would know. I also proposed a rule change to allow 3 standing committee members to add, to add agenda items to standing committees. That proposal never got to the full board for consideration. It was killed at exec. Another supervisor made a proposal to have the full county board review grants that impact our elections. That never even got a second at HR Finance, so it never got considered at the full board. So in light of that, I will continue to put things, make amendments, and be creative to get things on the full board agenda. If you don't like that, then maybe consider, when I put this request, take this out of this budget priorities and make the request for infrastructure and or HR Finance to consider the proposal to reskin and rewrite the county highway facilities, give it a fair hearing. Thank you.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
Yeah, I have a certain amount of angst with that 3% on county wages. We currently have a inflation rate of 4% and issues hiring and retaining people. Depending upon where it goes, you could turn your employees into philanthropists, keeping the county budget lower, and I don't think that's what we want to do.
Supervisor Robinson.
We vetted that question with Molly, our HR director, and she felt as if the 3% maximum is not per individual, but maximum across all employees, and she thought that was doable in light of what we had done last year and didn't jeopardize any progress that we had made. And we need some sort of target for when we go in for budgeting purposes, and she felt confident that 3% maximum would not impede our ability to be competitive.
Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Addressing the last issue first on the 3% maximum across the board, I agree with Supervisor Robinson. I actually agree with both statements. It is a difficult situation we find ourselves in, and we here have to balance both the needs and desires of our employees, and we do want to take care of them well. They make the county function. Without them, we're in a lot of trouble. We're not going to run the county sitting here as a 38-member board. On the other hand, we've had 6, 7, 8, 9% inflation. Our constituents, our taxpayers are feeling that. So I think this is a very good compromise. It's a good place to give. We're doing what we should as a board, which is giving a policy direction for administration to follow. Having said that, I think that we also need to have some policy direction on reducing the amount of county debt going forward and reducing our ability to add additional debt until we've brought ourselves back under control. We've gotten ourselves through a set of situations and choices that were made in the past by past boards. We are in a position where we are overextended. We have way more debt from a factual standpoint than what we really should have. Whether we're overextended in terms of state statute or not, I think is immaterial. Granted, we have to follow state statute, but just because state statute says you can do something doesn't mean that it's good fiscal policy for us to do that. So as I look at the budget going forward, I'm going to be looking for how are we going to reduce our debt load before I am going to sign on to any additional projects going forward.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move on to item 9C 2B, a resolution to establish or modify an impressed fund for various county departments. Resolution 32-23. Administrator Leonard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just realized today that in looking in your packet, it references, there's the resolution, it references Exhibit A, which isn't in there. We'll make sure it's in there for Tuesday. But just to, I can pull it up on the screen right now, but I'll also tell you where you can find it. It is in the packet for the HR Finance and Property Committee that was earlier this month. And you can, if we can switch that into the, thank you very much. You can see essentially what we're doing is we have the current amount in the exhibit and the amount that we are requesting you to amend it to. Essentially, we have people coming in and we need to make change, and right now we're spending a lot of staff time running to the bank. So we're asking to be able to keep a little bit more in each of our departments to limit the that kind of back and forth non-productive time. But it is in your HR Finance and Property Committee packet from earlier this week, earlier this month, and we will make sure it's in your packet for the county board for your next meeting on Tuesday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And just so everybody's clear, there was a discussion at HR Finance Committee and compliant and asked directly, was this also in compliance with the checks and balances for cash funds from our auditor, and they do fall in line with those. So they are compliant with our checks and balances. So any other discussion on that item? Okay, we'll move on to item 9C3, Infrastructure Committee and Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. 9C3A, a resolution approving and hiring of a broadband service provider. Resolution 33-23. Any discussion? Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. So my comments this evening pertaining to this are not really for or against the position. There may be a need and may be value in the position, or may not, it may not be justified. I'm not commenting on that. I am basically would like some answers in terms of the process that we're using. So as I looked at this, I considered what we've done in the past, and as far as creating new jobs in a very similar situation. In October, November last year, there was a proposal by me to add a county auditor, and in November 9th, 2023, HR Finance meeting, that was turned down, and there were several reasons that were turned down. And then both of the two positions use ARPA funding. Both of the positions were 1 year, 2-year process. So they're very similar. I mean, they were for different purposes, but the process of creating them was very similar. One of the reasons that it was turned down in HR Finance was it was stated that there's a formal position creation process where all positions go through a routine and are evaluated by the administrator and prioritized. I may not have that correct, but that's my understanding. So I'm wondering, did we do that? Does that apply to this position? If not, why doesn't it apply to this position, but it did apply to the county auditor position? Second question is, our board policy it was stated, and I'm not disagreeing with this statement, it's our board policy to not use one-time money for ongoing programs and positions. And so the concern was that the county auditor position would go on for more than the 1 or 2 years that I had proposed. I know that this position is supposed to end at the end of '24, but according to the committee discussions, we previously had an employee doing this work who left for maternity leave and didn't come back, and then we've had several other staff members doing the same type of work, but it's, not enough resources. So it's clearly an ongoing position. It may end in the future, but it has been going on. So, is this contrary to our board policy? If not, why not? And then the last concern I have is we are considering adopting a new budget priorities. That number one is while using remaining ARPA funds for capital needs. So before we even adopt the policy, we're making exception to that. And I know it's a very small amount of money, but it's like, if we're going to have a policy, let's follow that policy and let's use the remaining ARPA money for capital needs. I support that policy. So, thank you.
Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Supervisor Baker, I think I'm probably well-suited to answer maybe not well-suited, but I can answer the first question. I'll leave the other two questions to the chairs of the respective committees, whether it's the broadband, I guess it's the same person, whether it's the broadband task force or HR, finance, and property, and also infrastructure where this was discussed. But in terms of process, you do have an ordinance in Marathon County that relates to the process through which new positions are added, and that ordinance is section 4.20. Now, I would say that is a process that drives the staff creation of new positions. So it talks about the process by which, whether it's through the budget or not through the budget, so during the year, if there's a request for a new position from a department, it gives me guidance on what that analysis should look like, and also it provides some timelines that we should strive for to meet. This position request is not of that ilk. It's not from staff. This was a request that was discussed initially at the broadband task force based on the needs that the task force has with respect to the work of the task force. So to your first point, we do have a process in place for new positions. Again, those are allocated positions, full-time positions that will continue. And if you look in your budget, each and every department, we have a full-time allocated position chart, an org chart for each department. Those are, it references your allocated positions. Those are positions that don't go away without some action by me or the board to not fund them or to discontinue them. This, as I understand it, is a request for funding for what, in our terminology, we call a casual position. We hire someone for a period definite. It's not necessarily envisioned as an ongoing position. So I hope that answers your question, but it's 4.20 is the ordinance on position request.
Follow up, please.
Go ahead, please.
So then it would have also not applied to my proposal to create a county auditor, and it was the instructions I were given or the reasons I were given were inaccurate. Would that be fair to say?
I don't know if your position, I'm sorry, I don't recall, but if your position was to create a long-term position that would be allocated, that is funded through the budget on an annual basis and envisioned to continue, that process of 4.20 does, in my estimation, it applies to everything I do. You are the board, you set your own rules. You can violate them as you see fit with by either changing your rules, your operating rules with a 2/3 majority, or amending your ordinances. But I think it would matter on whether or not your position was an allocated position that was envisioned to continue.
It was for 1 to 2 years.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to clarify something that had happened in the infrastructure meeting. So we had 4 of our 7 members there, and when this came up, I did make the comment that I did not feel comfortable kind of pushing for a no vote, even though I disagree with it, because I felt it was something necessary to bring forward to a greater group of people, because we had approved the BEAD grant. I do not support this position, because if you look back at the BEAD grant, there is no indication that we were going to use, if we were going to use that money to hire someone, that there would be any additional fiscal impact. And even though it's ARPA money, it is fiscal impact, because that money could be used to something else. So this kind of falls in line with the typical thing that I see, that I've commented on. We tend to go down a path. We say there's going to be no impact. We're just going to take some money that's coming back to us, right? If we take state money or federal, it's our money. It's coming back, so we're going to take that, and then it kind of grows to something else, and then it becomes a program. And this happens. And in this position, we are using $57,000 of ARPA money, which seems like a stretch for really a true purpose of what those funds could be used for. Even though it's a small amount of money, I know it fits. I know it's not illegal, but I will state that. It's a temporary position to market broadband, to figure out the underserved and all these details, 20 hours a week. That can be any hours of the week. So what are those hours going to be? They're not defined. It could be in the morning. It could be at an infrastructure meeting. It could be 7 o'clock at a county meeting. It could be at a municipal meeting, a meeting of businesses, wherever. And there's going to be overhead, because that person, whoever it is going to have to report back to someone within the county, and then those persons are going to have to work on that information, and then that information is going to have to go back to the task force, and then the task force is going to have to work on that, and it's going to go back to infrastructure, and then it's going to go back to county, and we're going to spend time on it. For what? What is the ultimate value that we're going to get from this? I think is minimal. Are you really going to be able to change these maps and get this detailed information about who is underserved and not served at all? Are we really going to be able to get into those details? Are we going to be able to market the broadband truly to people? Well, if we are going to market it, if that's one of the details of the job, well, there's a cost to that. However, you're going to market this product, the bug tussle or whatever. So I'm not saying it's a bad position. I don't see where the value is going to come through, and I'm just not going to vote for it. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
So the county's had dedicated staff working on broadband for a few years. We first had Melinda Osterberg from University Extension. She left to take a job with Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and we were without staff. Then we hired Noor Ali Hassan to work as a special projects person within the administrator's office when we did not have a deputy county administrator. When we hired a deputy county administrator, she took a position with the health department and continued supporting the efforts of the broadband task force. She is a proud mother and decided not to come back to work for us, and so we've had a void of in terms of supporting our broadband efforts. Why is this important? Well, the federal government has approved the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Grant of $42.5 billion nationwide. Wisconsin stands to get between approximately $800 million to $1.1 billion. Those will be allocated based upon the FCC Fabric Map. The Fabric Map shows areas that are unserved and underserved. The map is wrong. There are 2 ways to challenge the data. You can challenge it on an individual basis, which is cumbersome, and a number of people have tried and not succeeded, or you can do bulk challenges, which is what we're hoping this person can work with the PSC and others to make sure that those areas that truly are underserved are reflected in the map and are therefore eligible for grant funding in the future. The other thing we're hoping this person will do is work with local governments and others to promote it, and as well as work with internet service providers. Jerry Klein and I were at a broadband meeting hosted by the PSC a couple weeks ago, and we had a discussion with Solaris, which is serving Wood County, and they have an interest in working with Marathon County. The problem is right now the 2 people working on broadband in the county are Jerry Klein and myself. Jerry doesn't have the time, and I'm not, it's not my role to be that day-to-day operations person, and we need someone for these people to go to. The value of the position is to hopefully coordinate the outreach, get better maps, coordinate our challenges, work with PSE, work with others, coordinate with the internet service providers, and take advantage of that 5-year window that is there. But it is, the critical thing is to get the relationships and the maps correct in the next year and a half, which is why we're sunsetting it at the end of 2024. But this is a critical position relative to our efforts to move broadband access forward. Not only access, but accessibility. The issue of not only is it running past your house, but can you afford it? There are a number of programs that can help, and that's where this person will come in with the American Connectivity Program. So it is an important position.
Supervisor Carvelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions and maybe a comment. So this part-time position, do part-time positions receive benefits?
Not without formal approval by my office.
Okay, thank you. In my comment, there's the second to the last whereas. It says assist students in citizen outreach and then serve as a point of contact for citizens. I believe that's our job, if I'm not mistaken. And I've done that in my district, as Supervisor Robinson knows. There's been plenty of people that contacted me about this. So I appreciate that. But I understand, your resource needs for the position. I do. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Supervisor Van Cray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I have two questions. One is, if this position is not approved, then what happens? Is this work just not done, or is it still hodgepodge together by various staff?
Supervisor Robinson, please.
It's that hodgepodge. The problem is we don't have somebody, and Supervisor Corelli indicated that he has forwarded a number of requests. People are looking for, when am I going to get served? Who's going to provide service? I don't know who answers that question. So, we did accept the BEAD. The funding for this is $18,151 to the BEAD planning grant. So we've already accepted that. This board has approved that, and then $57,000 from ARPA. I don't know how we're going to do this work. I think we'll limp along, perhaps not as successfully as other communities. And other communities are all doing this, and we have been ahead of those communities. I can't guarantee if we don't have somebody in place that we will continue to be in that position of being ahead of some of the others when we attract those dollars.
Thank you. And then my second question is, this kind of seems like a specialized position. Does this person exist in the world who wants to work part-time doing broadband outreach work?
Supervisor Robinson, please.
It is deliberately called a service provider, and it gives us the ability to either hire or contract. There are people, Oneida County has a contractor, other counties have contracts. University Extension provides these services in other areas. It hasn't been a good fit. We have that option if we can't hire. I think sometimes these part-time positions are attractive to certain types of people. We'll find out and maximize our recruiting efforts.
Vice Chair McKeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we had a very good discussion. I know there's only 4 members there. However, we did have a good discussion on this position. Jerry Klein, the director of CCIT, was asked who the support person would report to, and Jerry Klein said it would be him. So I'm sure there's going to be some schedules and supervision from Mr. Klein on this position. I support this position because the Broadband Task Force has made a lot of progress in the last 18 months a lot more than has probably been accomplished in the last 10 years. We had a position that was doing this. She left. It was explained that there's a lot of money, resources out there from the state and federal government for grants, and it was made clear that this task force may not be able to be in the position to apply for these grants just because of time. And I think this $57,000, it's going to be well used if we can get some of these grants, broadband grants for Marathon County. And it does sunset. There was a question about, are we going to, is this position going to continue? That would be up to the board. It does sunset December 31st, 2024. So that was a good question, but again, that would have to be approved by the board, whether it comes through the administrator's budget or a request. So I do support this, this position just because of the importance. We know Marathon County has a lot of areas that are not covered by broadband. So thank you.
Supervisor Scherfenski.
Thank you, Chairman. So one of the things that this position does is they're looking to try and quantify and detail the data on the maps. My understanding is that from the task force is that we have significant issues relative to dealing with the maps. These are both technological and legal in terms of licensing agreements. So what I'd like to do before we approve such a position, I'd like to ask either Supervisor Robinson or Corporate Counsel, where do we stand relative to the resolving the licensing legal agreements? Because without those issues being resolved so that we can actually deal with the software and deal with the maps, this person can do nothing.
Corporate Counsel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've had some discussions about the contracts. So I guess I'll generalize and say, typically when licenses and agreements for us to obtain software licenses are offered, they're offered with very boilerplate, one-sided agreements. This was no exception. In my review, I saw some areas where the language could use some improvement, and also some areas where the language simply contradicted the county's requirements under state law. So at the minimum, those pieces would need to change in order for the county to even be able to enter into a licensing agreement. So that discussion is ongoing, but we have not, I guess, come to an agreement with the entities that are offering those licenses.
So a follow-up, please?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So if we do not have the licensed software available, is there anything that this person can actually do to facilitate the map amendment process?
Supervisor Robinson, please.
I believe there is. I think we can work through the Public Service Commission and others and provide them data. The state is in the process of developing their plan, their action plan, and I think some of that information will be resolved over the next couple of months or few months. But the PSC has done some bulk challenges in the past, and we would look to work with them if we can't. We've got a good working relationship with some of the staff there, as frustrated as we are. But I think that there are opportunities if we can provide good data. And again, we encourage individuals, but I know that several people have tried, and that's been difficult. So I would think that ideally it would be good for us to have that capability through the licensing agreement. If we can't, we'll look for alternatives. We've been engaging our congressional delegation in aspects of this discussion, and we would continue to work with them as well.
Administrator Leonard had additional comments to add to the conversation. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To your specific question of is there still value with the license, I think when Mike is talking about the limitations under the license, and this is an oversimplification, but I think it's genuinely accurate. It's our ability, the limitations are on our ability to take the information we would get through the license agreement. We would have information we would be able to see. It's with sharing that
Correct.
externally.
We can't actually go forward and use it to challenge anything.
We can't take the information and share it externally. My sense, and we'd have to look through this, and Mike and I, we have had some conversations about it. We can still use the information for our own, to guide our own internal actions about reaching out to pursue corrections. We simply can't take that information, and this is a real oversimplification, but here's our license, this is what we got, this is the map, and all of you that are on here, you need to go on and amend your, or log a request to have your property listed as under or unserved. So again, oversimplification, there still is some value in my estimation, and that was the conversation Mike, Jerry, and I had. There's still some value, but absolutely your point is well taken. If the language isn't amended as Mike indicated, the value is limited.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Supervisor Cavalli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. Is there a draft of the job description? Does that exist, or has it previously existed?
I think is it included in the packet?
Yeah, I believe it's the next page after the resolution.
Yep.
Page, is it 40?
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you. And then my follow-up question. I believe Supervisor Robinson and Vice Chair McCune had mentioned that there was a person that was previously doing this work, correct?
There was people from UW Extension at one time, and then there was a person from administration that has now taken a leave for had a child.
Okay, thank you. And based on that, so the person that was doing this previously in administration or Marathon County employee, correct? That so they were just paid based on their other job duties, or was it based on what they were doing for this?
This is my recollection. As Chair Gibbs referenced, we had Extension, UW Extension perform this work. And what UW Extension could do relative to what the Broadband Task Force was asking, there wasn't always direct alignment. So for just one example, applying for grants and what Extension could do and what the Broadband Task Force wanted didn't always align. Didn't fit under the, I'll call the education umbrella that Extension really focuses on. So the board took the funds that would go to that position through Extension, shifted them to administration for purposes of a special projects manager or special projects position. We utilized those funds temporarily for that purpose to have an individual hired through administration on a temporary basis to perform that work. That person, as was referenced, is one of the child care many that when she did the math, it made more sense for her to stay home.
So those funds no longer exist?
It's a small amount of money that was used. I want to say it was like $40,000. Increased cost, that was one of the positions that ultimately got absorbed into the remaining portions of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think it's pretty clear that the work was being done before. And if you look in the resolution, it states is expected to sunset the end of 2024. The work is going to continue after 2024. I don't see any reason why we should think that it's not going to, if it's such an important project that we've been putting all this energy into. Somehow it's going to get absorbed, just like there was a comment just made about that, being absorbed into the funding somehow. So let's at least be honest about that if there is a need, then this is going to be a position and it's going to be part of our budget. I would like to, there's a couple thoughts I had. What's the additional funding and where is it coming from when it comes to all of the things that are listed in that job description, which I asked to be put in this packet, like kiosks, mileage, where's the mileage for this person to travel all over the place, to do all these things throughout all the libraries in the county, to go to town meetings and such. Is the ARPA money covering that? Is that part of the 57,000, or is that going to be from an IT budget? Is that a finance budget? Is that a infrastructure budget? I don't know. The person's going to be the primary contact for Bug Tussle, and we know all the work that Supervisor Robinson has done and Jerry Klein have done in that regard. So it almost seems like this is an underrepresented job description of the amount of work it's going to take. So let's be honest, that potentially this is going to be a job at probably 6 figures, because if you do the math, $75,000 for 18 months is $50,000 a year for 20 hours of work. You double that, that's $100,000. So I get the work needs to be done. I get that there's people who can't do it and people who have left who've done it. But let's just be honest about that. Thank you.
Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. A while back, I asked a question about our policy not to use one-time money for ongoing programs and positions, and apparently, did anyone have an answer to that, or was that just, we're just going to not worry about that policy? Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
I'll try. One of the reasons we tied it into the sunset is that's basically the ARPA dollars need to be encumbered by December 31st of 2024 and expended by December 31st of 2026. I think we were thinking that it was literally a one-time position for that period of time to work with the Internet Service Providers to develop that background. Once you develop a lot of that background information, you won't need to redo it. So there's the intensity is up front. So it's not meant to be a permanent position.
Thank you.
Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that a lot of these concerns sounds like appropriate place would have been to take them up at the committee, but just my thoughts. Thank you.
Moving on, Supervisor Sherfinsky.
Thank you. I'd like to address one thing that we really haven't talked about, and what we're really looking at here, the whole BEAD process and everything else with this, from our perspective, is we're trying to expand. As a county, we've said we think it's our job to try and coerce or cajole companies who are out there as profit-making organizations. We're trying to say, we would like to get you to expand your range of business. And of course, any company is looking at how if I'm going to expand my business, where am I going to do it? I'm going to do it where I think I can make a profit. In the terms of broadband, we're looking at geography, we're looking at population density. And the fact is, in some respects, first of all, once you get out of the metropolitan areas, you get into the more rural parts of the county, the population density simply isn't there. Nobody's going to make money by running fiber along 450 miles of county highway to serve, the population density. That's, sorry, it's a tough spot to be in, but that's reality. The second aspect of that is, this position really is out there to try and do two things. One, trying to identify which areas of Marathon County are underserved because of those physical and economic realities, and then turn around and try and make a case to the federal government to get more money. And that money is going to be used as an enticement to try and get whichever broadband provider, and they're all equally good, try and get them as an incentive to go out there to places they would not otherwise serve. What we're doing here, it's well-intentioned, the thought process is good, but I think we're swimming up a very strong current. We're trying to do something that all the economics and all the physics and all the business factors are pushing against. So for that reason, I don't think it makes sense for us to be doing that. Thank you.
I'd just make one obvious point, and that is there's, the bipartisan infrastructure bill put put 42 billion nationally into broadband expansion. The state of Wisconsin is going to receive 800 million up to 1.2 billion dollars in the not so distant future to provide broadband expansion in the state of Wisconsin. That is targeted at some of the hard, as Supervisor Chervinsky clearly pointed out, some of the challenges of the economics of those delivery of services. If we want to actually try to impact that and get some of those dollars to be able to provide those services to those impacted areas, we have to have somebody to coordinate that information and coordinate those efforts. The state of Wisconsin and the Joint Finance took all money out of the budget for broadband expansion. So the only resources are going to be the federal bipartisan infrastructure money that's coming to the state. So I think there is necessity to actually try to impact those maps if we're going to have actual impact and continued impact on delivery of broadband services that we have made in progress. Starting 13 years ago, we made zero progress when we relied on the ISPs. Since then, we have made some significant progress in providing service to the residents of Marathon County. Other discussion? Okay, we will then move on to from Environmental Resources, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, a resolution to amend the 2023 capital improvement project list and to add Phase A, closure of Bluebird Ridge Recycling and Disposal Facility. Resolution 34-23. Any discussion? We have the director from the Solid Waste Department here with us if there's any questions for him. And he sat here patiently for over 2 hours. Any discussion? Okay, well, seeing none, we will move on to announcements and/or requests. Any announcements or requests? I have one announcement, and that is from the clerk, and that is everyone has mail in your mailboxes, so please, by all means, stop by and pick up your mail as you leave the meeting. Any other discussion? Any other announcements and/or requests? Seeing none, we're down to item number 11. Vice Chair McEwen with a motion. And second, Vice Chair McEwen, did you have an announcement?
No, I was that.
Supervisor Longenau with a motion, Supervisor Covelli with a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion stands. We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.